Hello, welcome everyone. So glad that you've joined us today. My name is Rita Koutsidimos, and I'm the Executive Director for the BC Alliance for Healthy Living. And we're just delighted to welcome you into our webinar called Small Towns, Big Steps in Active Transport. I would like to start by acknowledging that this webinar is being broadcast from the traditional unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, where we have the privilege to live, work, and play. I think it's important to provide that acknowledgement as a way of recognizing that we are living on land that was taken by colonial force, and those forces still contribute to institutionalized racism to this day. And as an organization, BC Alliance for Healthy Living, we are committed to health equity and justice for our Indigenous friends, neighbors, and nations. So the purpose of our webinar today is to share with you some interesting findings from a research project that BCAHL has been leading over the last year, specifically on active transportation in smaller communities. But before we get going, I would also like to acknowledge our funding partners that have made this project possible, including the Real Estate Foundation of BC, Pacific Blue Cross, CN Stronger's, CN Stronger Communities Fund, and Heart and Stroke Foundation. We'd also like to thank our project advisory committee members and all of the local government leaders who responded to our survey, and an extra special thanks to our friends in Burns Lake, Duncan, Gibsons, Nelson, Powell River, and Rossland, who welcomed us into their communities and shared what they've been doing to promote and support active transportation. So we hope that you'll enjoy the program today, and I know that you're all experts in video conferences these days, but I wanted to go over a few items that are specific to our webinar. So if you're having trouble hearing, of course, turn up the volume on your phone or computer, and just to be aware that this is a go-to webinar. And so the control panel on the right-hand corner of your screen has a questions feature, and that's where we'll be taking questions. So we encourage you, as you're listening to the webinar, if you think of something that's kind of a curiosity for you, or something that you want a little bit more explanation about, please just type it in there. And then by the time we have opened it up for questions, we'll have a bunch of questions to go. And we love to get your questions, so don't be shy. There will be a poll, and you'll see a blue screen with a multiple choice questions, and we'll give you a few seconds to respond, and then we'll publish the results for everyone to see. So I just really can't emphasize, we love the questions, and we'll answer as many as we have time for. But if we miss any of them, we'll send out a post-event email with any missed questions and answers. So let me start by telling you a little bit about our project, Small Towns, Big Steps in Active Transport. So BC Alliance for Healthy Living has long been a champion and advocate for active transportation because the relationship between land use and health is strong. And from the research and from a health perspective, we know that built environments have a significant influence on whether people are physically active, have social connections, and can access healthy foods or services that enhance their health and wellness. But as we engaged BC communities in conversations about active transportation, and this is largely through our work on Communities on the Move, where we were really trying to advance a healthy transportation agenda, and one of the pieces of that was advocating for a provincial active transportation strategy, which luckily we do have today. So we were successful with that. But as we were doing that work and talking with communities and trying to build support around this platform and agenda of healthier transportation for all, we often heard that guidance and advice that works in Vancouver and Victoria just doesn't apply in smaller communities. And that's not surprising, as most of the research and best practices has been conducted in large urban centers. So it's a very different context in cities that have higher population densities, more traffic congestion, but also more frequent transit, and that often have more compact mixed use neighborhoods, as well as significant planning and engineering expertise and budget. So the type of planning and infrastructure that we think of as supporting active transportation is not always feasible in smaller communities. As well, there's limitations of a small tax base, which provides fewer resources for staffing and capital and operational budgets. And it's not uncommon for smaller towns to not have a planner with any expertise on active transportation specifically, and in some cases, not even to have a permanent full-time planner. However, we do know that that many small communities are making strides, and there are also assets in smaller communities that may set them up well for active transportation, such as lower traffic levels, higher levels of community trust, those connections, a closer relationship between citizens and local leaders, and really often a smaller geographic footprint. So the Alliance, we set out to take a closer look at what would work to support biking and wheelchairs and walking in small towns. We wanted to look at the published literature, but most importantly, we wanted to speak to local leaders that were standing out in British Columbia, and to get a sense of what really is feasible in the context of a smaller center in BC, and to understand what communities have done to overcome barriers, but also to take advantage of some of those assets and opportunities that we find in smaller communities. And so we hope that by sharing these lessons and best practices, it will inspire other small communities to look at how they might promote and support active transportation in their own communities. And, you know, the bigger picture is that we really just want to make sure that all British Columbians have an opportunity, whether they live in a big city or a small community, that they can go active to get around. So I'll be turning it over to Carrie Mckelvey, who's going to give you the details on the research and our findings. But before I bring her on, we'd like to ask you a question. So Brenda, if you'd like to pop that up. So we just wanted to get a sense of who's here today. So just answer this question in the best way that describes your interest in today's topic today. Why are you here today? So is it that you work in local government, you work in public health, you're coming from this from a research or policy perspective? Are you interested in healthy built environments, or are you perhaps an advocate or a champion for active transportation? Okay, that's great. So we've got lots of folks from public health, as well as some local government folks, and some interest in healthy built environments and champions too. That's great. Excellent. Well, now it's my pleasure to introduce Carrie Mckelvey. Carrie was our lead on this project, and she is the principal for Stride Consulting, but she's worked with BCAHL on multiple projects over the years, including as the evaluation lead on the Phase 1 initiatives funded by the BC Physical Activity Strategy. Carrie has a PhD in human kinetics from UBC and has been working in health research and evaluation for over 25 years. So we're so glad to have her on our team and here with us today. Carrie, over to you.
Well, thank you, Rita. That was a lovely introduction. I'm so happy to deliver to all of you the highlights of this groundbreaking research. Next slide, Brenda, please. So first, to orient you, we had a 5-phase research plan. We started with reviewing literature and collecting resources relevant for small towns working in active transportation. So we're working on that last fall in 2020. We were looking at promising practices and getting oriented to small town active transportation before engaging with the municipalities in BC. Next, we worked on developing indicators to mark progress in active transportation in small towns. And we then conducted a survey, reaching out to small municipalities in BC to ask about challenges in active transportation and key factors that help them make progress. So then we applied the indicators and analyzed our survey to help us identify a subset of small towns that had made progress in active transportation. And then we went out into the field, sometimes virtually and sometimes in person, to talk to active transportation champions in small towns and see the changes that they are trying to make. Next slide, please, Brenda. Next slide. Oh, thanks. Little delay. So we saw from the literature that small towns have some key advantages that set them up well for active transportation. There's good places to walk and ride bikes. There's parks and green spaces and trails to support active transportation. Often there's compact downtown centers suited to active transportation trips. And there's a nice history of collaboration and partnering to get projects done. Next slide. But at the same time, there's a host of challenges common to small towns. There's car-oriented roads, just like in urban centers. There's often a real lack of active transportation options, a lack of infrastructure to support it, constrained terrain. Yeah, thanks. Constrained terrain. Physical constraints like due to mountains, lakes, and the way a town was originally built. There's safety challenges, like high speeds, lack of space, lack of facilities. Highway as Main Street consistently challenges a lot of small towns, so provincial highways as the main street, prioritizing through traffic. Climate, so lots of snow and ice, and maintenance issues, and the cost of that maintenance are all challenges. And we saw that bridges, from the literature and from our time in small town, bridges are key in the active transportation network. There's lots of them in small towns, crossing rivers and lakes, but they're fraught with challenges to safety, constraints in whether you can even build a safe space for pedestrians and cyclists. And they really mess with the perceived ease of active transportation. Next slide. So we thought about data that existed at the community level, defining our small town target as those communities with between 1,000 and 30,000 people. We looked at the portion of the population that walked and cycled to work and examined ICBC cyclist and pedestrian crashes over the last few years. We considered active transportation projects that were funded over the last 17 years, participation in Go by Bike, and having an active transportation plan. Next slide. While we were populating the indicator data, we reached out to 86 small towns with an online survey, and we had nearly 60 respondents. So that was a really enthusiastic response rate. Our respondents are all represented in the biker on the slide. We heard from Cranbrook, Valemont, Lillooet, Oliver, Logan Lake, Port McNeill, Dawson Creek, and so many others you can see there. Next slide. Through analysis of the survey findings, on the left side, you can see that we found out that exactly half the small towns had leadership or a champion in town to lead active transportation. However, fewer had dedicated staff for active transportation at just about a quarter of small towns. In the middle panel on the slide, we see that nearly 2/3 of the towns had supportive policies for active transportation, but less than a third had adequate funding to support active transportation projects. On the right side, 2/3 had active transportation represented in their official community plan, but not so many had a standalone active transportation plan at just 43%. Next slide. We asked about infrastructure that was already in place to support active transportation. And it was common for small towns to have crosswalks in busy areas and sidewalks in place. Over half had continuous and connected pathways, places to sit, and connection to other communities. Fewer had some basic and inexpensive infrastructure like bike racks, signage, lighting, and aesthetically pleasing features like art or landscaping. Next slide. BC Small Towns indicated that there were several challenges for active transportation progress. A key one, indicated by 72% of small towns, is lack of funding. More than half also struggled with inadequate staff capacity and competing community priorities. Between 30 to 50% reported challenges ranging from lack of data, an audit-dependent culture, challenging weather and topography, and conflicting goals. Next slide. So then we started putting the pieces together. We assigned points for the indicator data. We prioritized communities that answered our survey and those that had leadership or a champion in town. We considered community size and region in selecting small towns from among the higher scorers. In our case studies, we aim to showcase a diverse group of small towns with different active transportation challenges and approaches. So in the end, we virtually visited, can go back to the previous, thanks, Brenda. In the end, we virtually visited with Burns Lake and Rossland, and we had in-person visits with Powell River, Nelson, Gibsons, and Duncan. We did interviews and toured the towns to document their challenges and progress. We wanted to construct visual stories to complement our written case studies, so we collected video footage and lots of photographs. Next slide. So before diving into the lessons that the small towns had to teach us, let's have a look at some of the common challenges. So even though these 6 towns had made greater progress than many other towns, they still felt the burden of obstacles. This table shows how the leader towns fared on the challenges that we asked about on the survey. So this is a collection of challenges indicated by at least 4 of the 6 leader towns. So of note on here, inadequate funding was a problem for 5 of 6 of the towns, of the leader towns, and the other 4 challenges were trouble for at least 4 of the leader towns, like conflicting goals between the municipality and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, lack of data, and challenging topography. Though the leader towns faced lots of challenges, they made progress anyway. So we collected 11 key lessons through our analysis of interviews and time spent with municipal staff in the 6 small towns. Next slide. So we learned that collaboration is the foundation of progress. And sometimes collaboration is easier in small towns where people are accustomed to working together and pooling resources to get things done. This was true for Burns Lake, who worked in partnership with nearby Lake Babine Nation on their recent sidewalk project. Without a planner on staff, the village is accustomed to finding leadership and champions wherever they can, like within the senior society, mountain bike groups, and schools, as well as working interdepartmentally. We saw that collaboration in small towns helps to overcome capacity gaps and get things done. We heard of the value of looking to other projects and strategies to see where energy and know-how can be leveraged towards active transportation. Next slide. The case study communities advised being ready for grants. This meant having strategies and plans in place to act fast on funding opportunities. External funding for active transportation is so important to small towns, with most small municipalities unable to fund active transportation projects out of their operating budgets. Powell River acknowledged a challenge with being ready for grants. Small towns also need grants to develop the shovel-ready projects called for in RFPs, in addition to the funds to implement the project. Here we see Burns Lake Sidewalk project in progress. They were proposal ready and construction ready when they applied for the grant and needed to make significant progress during the short good weather window in Burns Lake. Next slide. Using trails and right-of-ways as connectors to build a network is common in small towns. Traveling on trails is enjoyable. It's sometimes quicker way to get from A to B. We heard about this in Burns Lake, Gibsons, Powell River, and Rossland, where the availability of green space and flexibility in right-of-ways is a strength. Incorporating natural spaces in the active transportation network offers the chance for residents to spend time in nature and accrue mental health benefits in that space. And this concept of safe, healthy outdoor space was noted as particularly important during the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide. For small towns, the active transportation network can include neighboring small towns and some case study communities like Rossland, Duncan, and Gibsons, for example, are working with other municipalities and regional districts to increase the opportunities and safety of active travel between towns. This example here shows the short distance between Rossland, Warfield, and Trail, less than 9 kilometers or 25 minutes biking to Trail with Warfield in the middle. The challenges here on this cycling trip are highway riding and a steep elevation loss from Rossland to Trail of about 1,000 meters leaving Rossland. So e-bikes are definitely part of the conversation here. Next slide. Creating accessible opportunities for active transportation was an important part of the approach in all case study communities. In Duncan, we heard how they coordinate with Cowichan tribes and are factoring in people who live with lower income and those who don't have access to a car in their active transportation planning. So here on the left is a photograph of the new sidewalk on Jubilee Street in Duncan. So it's right outside the beautiful new Habitat for Humanity development. And the turf laid down, you can see on the right side of the photo, is protecting space for the eventual bike path, which will offer accessible active transportation connections to people living in the new development. We heard about how developing plans for the primary bike route in Nelson involve navigating the route alongside people with mobility and vision challenges to understand strengths and weaknesses from their perspectives. And in Powell River, the photograph on the right is the new Zynga bus, which offers accessible on-demand transit service and it's improving how seniors and those with low income are getting around and connecting in the community. Looking forward, these examples suggest a shift towards merging accessibility and active transportation plans in small towns, or at least deeper examination of how one supports the other. Next slide. Most case study communities acknowledged their town's active, outdoorsy culture as a foundational factor in active transportation progress. Active transportation was a priority for town council in the case study towns. And it was really up there with affordable housing and sustainability. In Nelson, staff report back to council on active transportation progress each year and invite ideas and collaboration on new projects going forward. And they see this as an important piece for staying on track with the active transportation plan and for keeping council engaged. In Powell River, Rossland, and Nelson, integrating active transportation with sustainability and climate change actions helps to keep council's attention. At the same time, community education is important to creating a positive atmosphere around active transportation. In Gibsons, the town works on explaining new active transportation infrastructure to residents so that the changes are less surprising. So good examples are the advisory bike lane, so pictured on this slide on the right, and green paint. Just explaining what the green paint means is important in Gibsons. So that would signify a dedicated bike lane. The City of Nelson highlights to the public benefits of sidewalk bump outs or Sharrow signs, for example, and sees this as a good way to keep the community engaged in active transportation. In Powell River, staff saw the importance of extensive community engagement and education after a bike lane had to be removed due to the community controversy and misunderstanding. So learning from this, they now prioritize engagement sessions to move active transportation projects forward in a positive way. Next slide. There's great examples of placemaking in most of the case study towns that have a walkable downtown core. For example, the totem tour in Duncan helps pedestrians find the totem poles while walking through the downtown streets, and the Station Square Common provides a destination for outdoor meetings or a rest in the heart of downtown. On the top right photo on this slide, Rossland, you can see, uses art to improve the aesthetics of active transportation. And on the bottom right, Spirit Square is a great destination in Burns Lake, close to downtown. Next slide. We heard about problems related to the provincial highway going through the heart of town in each of the case study communities. Traffic speed and volume are key concerns. The highway issue is front and center with active transportation planning in small towns, and there is a need to work with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure in a continuous way. More emphasis on active transportation solutions on highways will have a big impact on making these spaces safe. And here on the left, we see Burns Lake, Highway 35 and Highway 16, the Yellowhead Highway, the junction right in town. And in Rossland on the right, Highway 22 is Columbia Street right through the downtown. Next slide. It makes great sense in small towns to be ready to insert active transportation improvements into planned upgrades to other infrastructure. If water and sewer lines are being replaced and the road needs to be dug up, then maybe it makes sense to also pave a bike lane when the road is replaced and repaved. Collaboration between engineering, operations, and planning can help make these endeavors more efficient. Next slide. So build the network and don't let the perfect get in the way of the possible. Case study communities highlighted the need to create good connections to and between popular destinations like commercial areas, recreation centers, parks, and schools. They know that people traveling on foot, by wheelchair, or bike need safe and comfortable routes. In some places, these are mapped out in formal transportation plans, but in other places, it's just well understood where the priority routes are and what needs to be done next. We heard many times how important it is to prioritize progress over perfection. Starting somewhere was a key theme. Staff in many towns thought it was more important to start than to wait for the perfect solution. Given the challenges, perfect solutions for active transportation in small towns will be hard to come by. Staff also highlighted the need to right-size active transportation infrastructure to the small town context. Best practice in urban centers may not translate to small towns where traffic volumes are lower. Gibsons and Nelson gave examples of how their towns are testing options like road closures, knowing that adjustments can be made in the future if needed. Gibson's also highlighted how they are now starting to connect many parts of their active transportation network, acknowledging that it is disconnected, but that if they hadn't started a while ago with the pieces, they'd have nothing to connect now. And on the left on this slide is a shot of the Big Orange Bridge in Nelson, a big active transportation challenge. It's constrained and very busy with vehicle traffic. The Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure collaborated with the City of Nelson on a partial solution, a light system that is activated by cyclists to alert motorists that cyclists are on the bridge. And you can see on the right side of that photograph. So the Big Orange Bridge, tiny in the bottom left, and the yellow sign is part of the light system. It flashes when the cyclists are on the bridge. The city knows the solution is not perfect. It won't work for many cyclists who are nervous about cycling in traffic on the bridge, but waiting for the time and budget and possibly the space to install a dedicated lane for cyclists didn't make sense at the time. It's a good start, and the bridge is safer than it was before. Next slide. We heard in most small towns that e-bikes are changing the active transportation conversation in a good way. Given the difficult terrain with steep grades in many BC small towns, e-bikes may help make active transportation possible in places where it previously seemed impossible, and connections between small towns may be facilitated by e-bikes. Another bonus is that e-bikes are making active transportation accessible for seniors. Research in Powell River showed that seniors on e-bikes are a primary active transportation user group in that town. At the very least, leaders in small towns suggested that e-bikes are here. They are changing active transportation in a big way and need to be factored into plans and projects going forward. And on this side, you can see the left photo is the sustainability planner in Powell River riding her e-bike to work every day, setting a great example. In the middle, you see a family on an e-bike through the snow in Rossland. And on the right again, you see an older man on an e-bike on the Seawalk in Powell River. So illustrating that e-bikes are really taking off in Powell River. Next slide. So in the face of persistent, tough challenges, small towns in BC have made great strides in active transportation. Leader towns have an established culture of learning and collaboration, are interested in exploring and testing options and approaches that reach all users in an equitable way, and spend time educating and engaging the public. Council support is a distinct advantage in these towns, but it's also reinforced through staff efforts to merge active transportation and sustainability concepts and to keep active transportation plans on the agenda for council. Champions are key in active transportation projects, and in small towns, champions come from many places. We heard many times about the importance of progress over perfection, not waiting for the perfect solutions, but that may never come, but acting to start putting the active transportation pieces together. Next, we'd like to give you a taste of what we heard and saw in 4 beautiful BC small towns. Coming up is a compilation of our visits to Gibsons, Duncan, Powell River, and Nelson. Note that when you see the video start, you may have to click on listen in when you see the video start playing. It will be very obvious if you need to do that. And Brenda, we're ready for the video when you are.
So Powell River is located along Highway 101. We're 2 ferries up from the Lower Mainland. We're often referred to as the Upper Sunshine Coast, and it's not the end of Highway 101, but we are most of the way along Highway 101. Hi, my name is Jason Cow. I am the Director of Planning Services for the City of Powell River. what Powell River has done really well is accessible connection to the waterfront. The Seawalk is a great example of a pedestrian corridor right along the water, and this is just south of our commercial core, and just north of the commercial core is the Willingdon Creek Trail. And so connected, there are probably about 4 kilometers of access to the waterfront. And I think other than a small connection right through the middle of town that the city needs to work on linking those two, I think it's a great example of an accessible, connected waterfront, and I think that's a really positive thing that Powell River, a waterfront community, has done.
My name is Daniela Ferguson, and I'm a senior planner with the City of Powell River. We're on our beautiful Sea Walk, and it goes along the coast of our city through Westview up into the BC Ferries terminal, which is one of the gateways to our community.
I'm Anastasia Lukianova. I'm the sustainability planner with the City of Powell River, and I've been with the city for just over 2 years now. Zanga Bus is our on-demand pilot bus service. So the idea is, in a small community, it's really hard to have efficient fixed route buses. So instead of having a fixed route, you formulate the route in real time based on requests. So I'm just typing where I'm heading. Pick up in 9 minutes. Okay. Zanga Bus is on its way. Because people assume this is some kind of a private party bus because it looks so, cool. They don't think it's public transit. You're like, no, this is public transit. You can get on. Having those connections that you make while you're out and about, when you smile at the person, recognize your neighbor, that's actually very important. And that's something that you will not get when you drive past each other. You bike past someone who's walking, you can actually greet them, acknowledge them, and make those connections that are so important for a community.
So Gibsons is a small town. We've got a population, the last census was 4,600. We're a ferry ride away from Vancouver. So I'm Leslie Ann. I'm the Director of Planning at the town of Gibsons, and I've been here for 3.5 years now. This is our accessible path through Weingarten Park. Right now we are on the Gibson Sea Walk. So so when you go that way, you go all the way to Armours Beach, and then walking this way takes you through a property that hasn't quite developed yet. But last year, council negotiated a trail through that property. So now we have a connection to the other side. And so walking that way, you'll walk down past the marina and you'll go to the public market. So we've got Upper Gibsons and we've got Lower Gibsons. And it's a steep hill between the two, so topography seems to be one of our biggest challenges. Seniors and children and mums with strollers, we all need to get out. So we do have the Inglis Trail, which it connects Lower to Upper Gibsons, and I do take that with my 2 little boys on their bikes, and it's a wheelchair accessible trail that switchbacks up to Upper Gibsons. So we're also trying to integrate our active transportation routes with our natural asset management strategy that we're working on at the town. We've got our engineered stormwater ponds in Upper Gibsons is our stormwater system. And so it's a network of ponds, and we've got trails that go through the ponds. So people walk through there not really realizing that it's our engineered infrastructure, our natural engineered infrastructure. But so there's that trail network as well. And it's right near some seniors housing as well. So a lot of the seniors go in there. We're always trying to figure out how to improve our network and connect all of our routes. In the forest and on the sea walk as well, just being able to look out at the ocean and clear your mind sometimes. It is nice to have that. So those are things that we do keep in mind when we're looking at active transportation. A recent grant we just got was $675,000 to connect to connect a whole bunch of trails that we've already got, to put in bike racks in town, to bring in cyclists from Marine Drive. So they're coming off the ferry, they can come right into town, right through town, and continue on throughout the Sunshine Coast. So COVID has definitely brought people out and given the public an appreciation for what we have and the spaces we have, and also hopefully people can advocate more to improve what we've already got.
Right now we're in Centennial Park, which is really close to downtown Duncan, within walking distance. Duncan is a small community of about 5,000 people, but it is kind of the urban center for the Cowichan Valley. My name is Michelle Jeannot, and I'm the manager of planning for the City of Duncan. Our official community plan focuses a lot on smart growth principles, and just accommodating all needs, all mobility needs, and developing complete streets. And so we hope to achieve that wherever we can. One of the areas where there's redevelopment and densification happening is in this downtown core. And so, yeah, making it as pedestrian and cycling friendly as possible. We've made improvements to signalized intersections as well, and added flashers at the crosswalks wherever possible. So right now we're just off of Canada Avenue, and through that way is the city square, where Saturdays we have the farmers market. So at all of the entrances to the square, we have the ability to install these temporary bollards.
I'm Matt Blakely, the planner with the City of Duncan. The main things that I think about when I'm thinking about like active transportation, and especially in small towns, is how to get people to stay out of their vehicles, and kind of creating those, like this space here, like creating those destinations and having almost like a destination walk without it necessarily being a structured one, but just having little spaces outside of the businesses kind of draw people in.
We definitely have all types of users, whether it's recreational or if that's their choice as a main mode of travel. And we also are aware that some people don't have a vehicle, not by choice. They're not able to afford a vehicle, so we're really trying to accommodate everybody.
We're nestled between the Selkirk Mountains and Kootenay Lake here. Nelson's in the southeast corner of British Columbia. We're a population just over 11,000, but the regional population just surrounding Nelson probably doubles that. I'm Kevin Cormack. I'm the city manager here in the city of Nelson, and have been in that role for over 20 years now. Active transportation falls into our creating, strengthening our neighborhoods, and that means creating well-connected neighborhoods, and transportation is a really important part of that. Nelson proper, our topography is a bit challenging. Electric bikes have been a game changer for us.
My name is Sebastian Arakan. I'm a senior planner with the City of Nelson. So essentially there's four main components to this project. There's increased signage to explain to people that they are on a bike route, how to act. There's also reduced traffic speed. So the speed along this corridor is going to be 30 kilometers an hour. Also, there is a strategy to reduce traffic volumes. We're hoping to reduce volumes to 1,000 vehicles per day. And that is done through additional speed humps and through an intersection closure that we'll visit a bit later. And the final component is we're going to do some pavement markings, really to show that this is a bike route. So a lot of sharrows will be installed along this corridor. You got to see that it's nothing's going to be perfect, but it's a step in the right direction. And I think that's how you learn. Sometimes when we label things, then we create our own controversies. Active transportation is a good positive word, but for others, if it's felt like you're taking away from me. So I find, let's avoid labeling things and having them, the winners and losers out of that.
For example, here we're starting to move active transport. It's just transportation. We have vehicle transportation, we have cycling transportation, walking transportation, skateboard transportation. It's transportation. So now we don't have to take from one to give to the other. We're actually going to create good transportation.
And so I just wanted to thank you, Carrie, for your presentation, and wanted to open up the line to questions now. And I see we've already got a few questions here. And so I would encourage anyone else that has questions to go ahead and type them in the question box. That's part of the control panel there on the right-hand side of your screen. So we'll start with one from Phil here, who asks, is the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure indicating any signs of changing their highway and rural road policies to reflect modern active transportation research design, including the new provincial active transportation design standards and climate change planning? And I would say that is a very excellent question, Phil. Certainly, as you alluded to, the new Move, Commute, Connect active transportation strategy for the province does have specific guidance for smaller communities, and for it really is a unique document. But I would agree that there's a lot of work that we need to do in terms of shifting to particularly around highway and rural road policies, where we've got highways or provincial roads going through communities and acting as barriers between different parts of the community. So there's a lot of work to do there. I would invite you to join us. We are having a deeper dive into the subject on November 30th, and we'll have presentations there from Kate Bernias and Jesse Skomolski, who are with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and who are the leads on the active transportation strategy and files. So that would be a great question to ask when at that session, but we will we'll follow up on that one. We have another suggestion here from Kay Teschke to switch from saying to people ride bikes from cyclists, and I think that's a great recommendation, Kay. That it's better in terms of just describing we're all people, and many of us ride bikes, and a lot of people do ride bikes. I have a question here. From Allison, any of the communities that have creative solutions to snow and ice management? So I'll ask Carrie to jump in and speak to to some of the I think Roslyn had a really great example of that.
Hi, Rita. Yeah, the only one that we got really deep into that conversation with was in Roslyn, where they have that really deep snow there. So part of selling their some of their new active transportation infrastructure to the operations and infrastructure staff was to say that they could pile the tons of snow in the bike lane when in the winter. So they made it seem useful that way. So it wasn't, taking up extra space on the roads during the winter. They didn't see this as maybe the most positive or permanent situation, but it was a step in engaging the operations folks into the plan to put in the new space for people who ride bikes. I know that also in Roslyn, they are working on trail maintenance in the winter so that people can ride their fat bikes up to work at Red Mountain Resort. And there was a photo on the the slide that where I talked about using trails as connectors of a guy with riding his fat bike. He was on a trail and he had his skis strapped to his back. So I think that's becoming more common in Rossland. So they're looking to maintain the trail connectors in the winter, so that people can use fat bikes and also cross-country ski to the places that they're going. As well, they have people walking through the snowy trailways in the winter to get from A to B. But those are the two examples that I can think of. I know it's a challenge in many of the towns, like Burns Lake gets quite a bit of snow too, and they're just really good at at their winter maintenance and keeping the pathways cleared, and it's a priority all through the many long winter months. So they certainly keep their pedestrian corridors clear of snow to encourage walking year round.
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, I seem to recall that they had the priority to do the sidewalks and pedestrian routes as a first step with snow too, which I thought was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question here from Leaf, who asked, do you know if there are other communities in BC using Zunga Bus or similar service? Just curious about if you've heard more positive feedback or about challenges with an in-demand bus service.
I can answer that, Rita. So I think it is no. Powell River is the first in BC. It was funded through a Canada Innovation Grant. So I think there may be other communities in Canada that are trying it out as a pilot project as well. So it is a pilot in Powell River, which is great at the time because it's free for riders to use the Zunga bus, and they were assessing the ridership and the usability of it over the spring and summer, and looking at that evidence to see if they could expand the routes. So having a real testing approach to it is really great, and gathering that evidence to support the long-term and expanded implementation of that project. So hopefully it can become a permanent and really usable part of the active transportation system in Powell River.
Okay, great. We have another one from Jeff, who asks, I'm wondering if your project touched on how Burns Lake deals with having a major international transport corridor, Highway 16, through the community as it tries to enhance its active transportation network through the community. Sounds like you know something about Burns Lake there, Jeff. Do you want to answer that, Carrie?
I can try. The short answer is it's a big challenge in Burns Lake. They haven't landed on the right option, and are really wanting to work more with Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure to figure out options. It's a scary challenge having the transport trucks go right through town there, and we did talk about we talked extensively about the challenge of it, but unfortunately not about what the possibilities are. Things that they would like to explore would be a pathway off highway for people who ride bikes and for walkers. So that's a really expensive project. But yeah, I don't think that they have progressed too far in their research and exploring options. Just acknowledging at this point that it's a major impediment to encouraging cycling and walking.
Yeah, and I remember at one point in our conversation, they were also talking about, you know, the ideal thing would be to have like a circular route for the transport traffic, but they thought that that was probably highly unlikely given the expense of that. So they are looking at some of those other options around creating safer, separated active transportation routes alongside the highway. But you know, part of our work here is to look at things like that, and certainly as you saw, as Carrie described, the city of Rossland has really come up with some innovative solutions around new designs for a pedestrian friendly highway that runs through downtown, including angled parking and bump outs and additional pedestrian crossings. So we're going to, as I said, on November 30th, we'll have a deeper dive on this, and we will feature the planner who's been working for the last 17 years to improve infrastructure in the city of Rossland, and who's just done a really outstanding job. So I have a question here from Gloria. Have any partnerships with RCMP been sought to enforce lower speeds on the commuting roads that are also highways? And I don't remember there being any discussion about the RCMP in our case study interviews. But did that come up at all in some of the survey results, Carrie?
I am not recalling that. The only discussion I remember is in Powell River, where they were talking about enforcement and like working with our CMP to try to enforce a 30-kilometer per hour speed limit in a residential area, but wanting to create, you know, wanting to put in other ways to encourage and slow the speeds and the traffic volume. So not relying on that posted speed limit as the only strategy to decrease traffic and make it more safe. So no, I don't remember partnerships coming out at the CMP.
I will just say that in the town of Gibsons, there's a unique situation with the ferry traffic that intersect. So there is a ferry that gets off during that, you know, discharges hundreds of vehicles right around the school time, and there's this road called North Road, which goes right, is the provincial highway, and then it goes through the town, and at the one of the intersections, there are really 3 schools in that area. There's an elementary school, an alternative school, and then just around the corner, there's the secondary school. And so I know that in terms of, there's been discussions about bringing in the RCMP to monitor speed there. But again, one of the challenges in smaller communities is sometimes you have limited police force as well. And so I know that's been a challenge with the town of Gibsons. I have something else here from Tim, and I think this is the last one that we have time. Further potential collaboration resource is ICBC's Road Improvement Program, responsible for the program's partnership on road safety initiatives, and the Road Safety Audit Program can provide valuable input as well. That's great. Excellent. And then we have a final thing around, thank you for the informative, well, thank you, Phil, for the thanks. Will the webinar be available to share with others who were not here in the morning? Yes, we will absolutely post that to our website. And so we will post that shortly. So I just want to wrap things up now. So thanks again, everyone, for your engaging questions. That was so wonderful to have so much engagement from our audience. And thanks again, Carrie, for the presentation. Before we sign off, I would like to let you know again that we are going to take a deeper dive, and we'll have some presentations from the folks in Burns Lake and Lake Babine Nation, as well as our lead planner from the city of Rossland, who are going to take us on a deeper dive in some of this areas. And we'll also have the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and that's designed more of a workshop on November 30th from 9 to 11:30 a.m. So watch your inbox for details on that. And I would also just one more time like to thank our funders again, the BC Real Estate Foundation, Pacific Blue Cross, CN Stronger Communities Fund, and Heart and Stroke Foundation. We couldn't have done this work without your support. And thank you everyone again for being involved, and a big shout out to our communities that have informed this research. And just wishing everybody have a wonderful day, and make sure you get outside today. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.